Hi, I'm Ben.
And I'm Stefan.
I got here on time today.
Hooray!
You got here early, actually.
Yeah, I got here very early.
And we are
Animating in threes.
We are an animation podcast where three animators talk about an animated series or show and discuss it. Wait, I said that wrong. Animated series or movie or film
Series
or whatever
or
you want to
show.
call it.
Animations.
Yeah, animations. I hate when people say animations.
We're
I
a
don't
little
know
bit
why.
sleepy because we just recorded the previous episode.
And we also had cake, which made us tired, I guess.
It's Ben's birthday this week, and by the time this goes out 2 weeks ago...
We're technically time travelers, really incompetent time travelers.
We'll be sure to share the lotto numbers for last week next week.
It's completely redundant.
Our superpower is is revealing the lotto numbers after the lotto numbers have been revealed.
We're not saying it's the right lotto numbers. They're just lotto numbers.
I will just come up next week and read off a series of 17 random numbers. If you want to play them, that's your choice.
But if you do win, you have to give us at least
All of it.
$2 each. No, $2 each.
Yeah, well, except $2.50 of your lotto winnings.
$2.
Anyway, this week we'll be talking about Rick and Morty seasons 1 to 3. But before we get into that, we are going to be talking about Toons. We've tuned into.
Toons, yeah.
So, Stefan, what have you been watching?
I don't think I've been watching anything, to be honest. Like nothing.
We should have clarified this before we started the segment.
That kind of sucks because I haven't been watching much either.
So Rick and Morty is an American adult animated science fiction sitcom.
So, you have been watching nothing at all?
No.
Okay, what have I... Okay, I watched the first 2 episodes of the series, 12 Forever. And as I mentioned last week, it is mature when it's in the real world, but as soon as it gets into this imagination world where the main character Reggie goes into because she doesn't want to grow up, it becomes very childlike. And there's all these like zany characters. Like, while Rick and Morty does have zany characters, the ones in 12 Forever to me just seem very one note, and they're all just like, "Oh, I'm a crazy little thing, ha ha ha."
To me, I think considering it's already introduced this imaginary world very early in its set piece, I think it will develop that and make them more mature as the series goes on.
Yeah, I hope so. Because otherwise, I'll just get halfway through it and just not watch.
Yeah.
Have I been watching anything else, Stefan? Have I?
I remember I have been watching something.
Oh!
It's very obscure. I don't know why I was watching it. No, I do remember. But anyhow, I've been watching it was an old ABC series called Ruby Gloom.
Oh, I remember that show. This is when like goth and emo was at its height.
Yeah, it was like a goth and emo show for like kids. It's about this girl who had like a crush on her skeleton roommate.
Oh, I have faint memories of this.
It's kind of fun and cute, but it's also very bizarre when you give it any thought more than 2 seconds. But this is really fun because this is actually an animation style that I can fully talk about because this is the Flash style that I used in the show that I worked on, which is the Flash puppetry thing.
I also remembered something I've been watching. So, back when it came out, I watched the first 4 episodes of Disenchantment on Netflix. And I didn't watch after that just because I thought it was going to be like one continuous storyline when it came out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So you've seen it when it came out.
See, I watched the first 4 episodes then, and I was like, it's not for me. But I've come back to it, and it's not my favourite show ever or anything, but it's decent.
No, yeah. I think it'd be an interesting thing to do for an episode one day because I think it is kind of intriguing to break down why it doesn't work.
For those of you who don't know, it's the latest Matt Groening show on Netflix. He does The Simpsons and Futurama, and yeah, now there's a fantasy animated show on Netflix called Disenchantment.
Yeah, I'm not sure about you, Ben, but me and Stefan were like counting down the days till that aired.
I wasn't
didn't
counting
watch
down.
it for like ages.
No, I watched it when it aired because I was really, because I had the Netflix subscription back then. But yeah, it's underwhelming. I think
Yeah.
to say the least.
Like I remember talking to you about it when I started watching it, and you were like, "Oh, I'm glad you're enjoying it," but then I started not enjoying it as much.
but
'Cause I was just expecting more from it.
It's bloated, kind of like decompressed storytelling, when I think it's a textbook example for restrictions breeding creativity, especially in animation. Like for The Simpsons and Futurama, it was a network television series distributed by Fox. It's had to be a very tight 22-minute runtime.
And it couldn't breach any of their like censorship stuff or anything.
Yeah. Not only like the censorship, but like especially with the runtime, you have to make sure that your 22 minutes is completely concise and jam-packed with like the absolute best jokes that you can write. But within Disenchantment, they don't have any runtime restrictions or content restrictions, so each episode is just like a rudderless, meandering, like 35 to 40 minutes.
It's not that long. It's 30 minutes at most.
Yeah, no, but even then, that extra 8 minutes really makes a difference to the narrative. It really drags in some spaces. But anyway, I think we'll discuss that in detail. Maybe I'll do that for the
it's
next
not
episode.
a bad show, but it's just when you're comparing it to the prime of The Simpsons and Futurama, it doesn't get up to that standard.
No, because you like ordinarily you'd feel like that Matt Groening with no restrictions would be like an incredible creative powerhouse, and a lot of the same team came back. I think David X. Cohen, I think works on it as well. But yeah, and then like what they ended up producing, I don't think really holds a candle to things like The Simpsons and Futurama.
Okay, now that we've shit all over Disenchantment.
Sorry about Groening. You basically pioneered comedy for a generation, so you can take a couple of hits. So, Rick and Morty. It's an American adult animated kind of science fiction family sitcom that's part of Cartoon Network's late night programming distributed by Adult Swim. And it follows the sci-fi misadventures of a mad scientist named Rick and his grandson Morty Smith as they go on, like I said before, sci-fi adventures. I'm not good at explaining plots, let's continue. And yeah, the show is kind of famous for, or at least renowned for, the contrast between, you know, trans-dimensional sci-fi adventure stories with, you know, the kind of the sad...
Nihilism.
Like sad nihilism, and also like the domesticity of family life.
And also, like, improvised stumbling and
yeah, and
burping.
weird improvised stumbly dialogue, which we'll get to. It's a hallmark of this series. So as of 2017, there have been 31 episodes of Rick and Morty, which have aired over 3 seasons, with the new season just recently being announced, or at least some new footage from the newest season recently being released.
Season 4 is about to come out in a few months. In November, I believe. November 2019, just in case you listen to this in another year. I don't know why you would, but just in case.
Yeah, so in terms of production, so Rick and Morty is a collaborative creative effort from creators Justin Roiland and Dan Harmon. So a little bit of production history. As I was going through it, Rick and Morty, I think, has quite an uneventful production history, at least in their run-up to the pilot episode. It's kind of run-of-the-mill, you know, how, you know, sitcom series develop and eventually are aired. So the duo first met at Channel 101, which is a non-for-profit short film festival hosted in Los Angeles, and that was co-founded by Dan Harmon himself. Justin Roiland had an entry into that monthly film festival, in which the two began collaborating shortly afterwards, after Harmon responded to Roiland's, you know, odd, dark sense of humor.
Because Channel 101, they had a lot of stuff for just indie creators just to dump all their stuff there.
Yeah.
And I know Justin Roiland did quite a few shows, one including The Cosby Show, which is where every single character was Bill Cosby. And I think this...
How long did this show run for?
I don't know, but
I
obviously...
do not see how a show where every character is Bill Cosby could possibly have any more than one episode.
Obviously, it was animated, and you know what? It's probably a bit dicey when it comes to the content in it.
So yeah, that was 2004 when the two began collaborating. In 2006, Roiland was fired from working on a television series, which he regarded as, you know, relatively restrictive creatively. Shortly after his firing, he developed a webisode for Channel 101, which is The Real Animated Adventures of Doc and Marty.
Obviously, this is a riff on Doc and Marty from Back to the Future.
Yeah, which is described as basically a bastardization of that franchise, which it follows kind of a proto-Rick and Morty characters that are more closer in line with their Back to the Future counterparts as they go on
Except the incest.
Yeah, except they go on a sci-fi journey rife with incest. And yeah, it basically acts as, you know, a strange kind of proof of concept short film for what eventually became Rick and Morty. Flash forward to 2012, and Harmon was briefly fired from Community, working on the television series Community.
Oh, that's a good show.
After which he phoned up Justin Roiland to inquire if he had any ideas for an animated series. and Roiland suggested utilizing the characters previously used in Doc
Doc
and
and
Marty and developing an 11-minute segment for Adult Swim. But Adult Swim pushed for a half-hour primetime program.
So 22 minutes with ads.
Yeah, and they initially wanted a more family-friendly teen rating, but they received pushback from the production staff and eventually secured an adult rating.
Teen ratings as in 17, 18, yeah? And 19.
That's adult rating.
So anyway, the first draft of the pilot script was completed within 6 hours
What the world?
by Harmon and Roiland. So I think you guys can talk a little bit about this as well, but the animation for the show is primarily done using Toon Boom Harmony.
Yes, it
You guys
is.
want to explain about
So,
that?
during our podcast, this is the 17th episode that we're on. This is the second thing that we're going to talk, a show we'll talk about, or movie, that is using rigged animation. So everything else we've talked about, so it's just this and South Park, I believe, that have used rigged animation. Yet they're completely different in how they do it as well.
In terms of Toon Boom Harmony, it's pretty much the premium software for 2D animation. You can basically do any sort of 2D animation.
Does it cost like $3,500?
Yes, that's why no one can buy it unless you're in a studio. But in terms of, it's not easy, but it's a lot more effective to do this sort of rigging sort of animation because you can set the skeleton in it like you would in a Maya model. And you can add all the nodes, all the null objects and make it all sound.
It's done so well where it doesn't look rigged, it looks hand-drawn.
Because some segments are hand-drawn.
It looks incredibly crisp. Like,
Yeah, it's crisp, but I wouldn't say it doesn't look rigged. I think, whereas BoJack Horseman looks a lot more rigged, and at least initially, and so does Archer and stuff. But I can still definitely tell, just because I've watched it a lot and analysed everything. But yeah, there's still a lot of off-model animation as well.
Yeah,
Off-model animation in Rick and Morty is mainly for whenever you're doing perspective scenes or action scenes that require more than the rigged puppet can allow.
So it's pretty much just whenever they're not just having basic dialogue, I would say.
Like, even when you're needing Morty to hide behind a counter and fire a gun, that would be off-model. That wouldn't be using the standard rigged puppet.
Yeah, but the thing is, they do make rigs for that off-model stuff as well.
Yeah.
So it's still all rigged and everything.
It's like how we would have done it in the show I worked on, where you always use the base model, but then you would completely redraw most of the assets, but still keep it within those folders, so it's all structured.
All post-production work on the series is done in After Effects.
Yeah,
okay.
definitely.
And all the background art obviously is done in Adobe Photoshop. Yeah.
So basically, this is the kind of show that if you were a freelancer who had a group of people and a thing to Adobe Cloud, you could actually make this show. It is not something completely out of reach that uses newfound technology and whatnot.
All you need is an idea.
All you need is an idea
and
a group of people qualified for the job.
Actually,
millions of hours to work on it as well.
Can we explain that joke, actually? When Stefan and I were in university...
We watched this video that they showed us at an After Effects tutorial class.
Yeah.
And it was this video that was saying how easy, doing motion graphics can be.
Yeah, it was basically, it was meant to be a tutorial on how to use After Effects and how to properly develop digital motion graphics. And there's a part when the narrator just basically says to it's get the video started, they're doing the introduction, the narrator says, developing digital motion graphics is easy. All you need is an idea and a graphic designer.
It's like this.
So someone already qualified to do it.
So all you need
That's exactly what we said.
So all you need is an idea and someone entirely different who's qualified to do the task.
And me and Michael were shocked that we were the only ones who cracked up laughing.
Because it was just delivered with such a straight face. If you have a graphic designer, this is all doable. It was that's not the point. Anyway, I just felt like the world needed to know about that. Yeah, so the animation production is handled by Bartle Entertainment out of Vancouver in Canada.
Canadian animation studio.
Yeah.
I don't think we've covered a Canadian animation studio yet.
This concludes our coverage of the Canadian animation studio. Yeah, and Justin Roiland has said that the animation style is heavily reminiscent, or at least inspired by The Simpsons, the works of Pendleton Ward, and Ren and Stimpy.
So what's the middle one?
The guy who does Adventure Time.
Ah, okay, yep, definitely.
Okay, it actually does seem like a perfect amalgamation of those three things. You
Yeah,
just
it
said.
does.
With those weird, with their weird little mouths and their kind of like off-model pupils.
For some reason, when you said The Simpsons and the Adventure Time one, I thought, okay. The second you mentioned Ren and Stimpy, I thought, yep, okay, this makes perfect sense.
So yeah, and then the show itself is pretty much famous for exploring the themes of nihilism as a personal philosophy, family dynamics, and parodic sci-fi concepts. Yeah. So Ben, do you want to kind of lead us into the episode? That's pretty much all the production. Well, at least the production history leading up to the first episode.
Okay, so we'll be for the first season we'll be talking about the pilot and a lawnmower dog. Okay, so the pilot episode. As Michael mentioned before, we have Rick just bursting into Morty's room at the dead of night and just in a drunken rage and drags Morty to his spaceship. He says, I'm gonna blow the world up and then we're gonna be the two people left. Oh, don't worry, Morty. If you want someone to mate with, we'll get Jessica, the girl you're into. Oh,
This is the actual dialogue, by the way.
Yeah, this actually sounds almost note for note what the dialogue is.
Oh, you think that's creepy? Don't worry, I won't hit on her. I'll just be all by myself. Oh, you're freaking out. You know what? Forget it. Let's just blow up the world.
I liked the stumbly dialogue the first time I watched it. I thought just kind of like the insane drunken ramblings of this guy were kind of infectious and very funny. And I think that carries on. I do like the weird improv stumbly stuff.
Are there any parts of the episode you want to discuss?
Yes.
Okay.
In terms of textbook how to do Western mats, Rick and Morty does some brilliant mats.
They are so
Like the first time you see the alien world, it's got a bright yellow sky, it's got wonderful oranges, it's just so colourful and lively.
yeah. The color palette is actually quite grey as well.
Yeah, it's like a pastel sort of thing.
Yeah.
Where it's got some great contrast, but it also seems a bit more muted, so it fits in with the rest of the more diluted real world as well. And I think Rick and Morty, in terms of its background art, really makes those pop. Like,
Yeah.
the background's always really fun to watch in this show.
And then there's even sometimes you can just spot small jokes in the background as well, which are really fun. Like kind of like BoJack Horseman, but to a lesser extent. The first time we see something really sci-fi, apart from the opening sequence, is when Morty is getting bullied by this kid. I think his name is Frank or something.
Frank.
And then Rick just comes in and freezes him. And it's like, Morty, we have to go, ignore him. So after they go, he doesn't unfreeze Frank. And then Summer, Morty's sister, goes up to him and goes, this is the future father of my children. Like, hey, Frank. And then, because it's made of ice, he slips and cracks into a million pieces.
And the pieces are bloody as well. So
I do love how, it's just so, and her reaction is very genuine.
Yeah,
she
it's
just screams in horror and just starts crying.
And later on, when we revisit the school, that you see a
There's
memorial.
yeah.
There's a lot of good jokes in this. Like, a lot of well-scripted jokes.
Oh, it's very funny.
There's also one visual joke that I really love, which I think Michael would mention too, which is where Morty's going on this rant to Rick about how Morty's always complaining about something, but Rick just stares at him with these dead eyes and this drool just slowly hangs and goes out of his mouth, and it's just a fun secondary action that's not needed, but it just makes it more interesting.
It's like you get Rick's character how it's like he's drunk at the moment. He's not really thinking, and it's like whatever way this harebrained scheme is going to go to, it's going to go badly.
This is also one of the episodes where it really feels a lot more off-model with its expressions, because I noticed that when I compared it to the one we got from season 3, the expressions of Morty in season 1 have a lot more like Morty biting his upper lip, a lot more eyes being bulgy. There's a lot more freedom in that sense.
There's a reason for that though, which is the fact that the Ricklantis mix-up has so many characters in it where, like, with the pilot, they can afford to because there's not as many characters.
Yeah. But I feel like that would be for a lot of them as well, where in the following seasons, they didn't want to do those really big, weird eyes. And a lot of the characters seem to actually be a bit more mature in the later seasons as well. Whereas here, they look like they're literally cartoon characters.
Another sequence I want to bring up, which I think is really well animated, is the chase scene as Rick and Morty are escaping from the grumflights.
That is a lot of fun.
Yeah, so they have shoes on where they can walk on any surface at any angle. So as they're running away, we see Morty bump to a few things, like a few aliens. And one of my favorite jokes is when Morty bumps into this guy. He's like smoking a sort of bong or something, and like it falls onto the ground. Morty's like coughing up all the fumes, and you see this little green piece fall out of his mouth. And then as they're still running,
It like runs. Yeah.
the little green piece just grows like a full life cycle in a few seconds, and it's like a really interesting concept, and like it's really well animated because it's really floppy, and all that while doing a run cycle as well. Yeah, it's just a really creative bit of world building.
And then it like completely it bookends it well with just Rick saying, "Don't think about it."
Yeah. No, I think again, like I'm gonna. Like Rick and Morty's really good at those like really simple kind of high concept funny little sci-fi moments. Okay, I'm gonna get into problems initially, but one of the problems I do have with it is kind of like random for the sake of random in sci-fi, or at least sci-fi comedy, where me and Stefan before have compared this to Futurama. Or in Futurama, every sci-fi concept has a core conceit or a joke behind it. Whether Rick and Morty, that's not always the case, where things will just be bizarre or will be called strange things for the sake of being confusing. Whether if you look at something like Futurama, every single kind of race of aliens, every single planet, every single, sci-fi throwback joke in it has either a core joke behind it or is a throwback to an existing property. I think that's one of the issues I have, because I don't think kind of bizarre, random, this thing's a glipglop.
Yeah.
Is that funny?
Yeah, there's some of that humor I'm not the biggest fan of in the series.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. Like I don't find any of the Plumbus stuff
actually really
funny
love
or
the
interesting.
Plumbus part.
Do you?
That particular sketch, yes, but I know like there are quite a few. There's a few episodes there's an episode in season 1 and an episode in season 2 where a lot of it is improv.
Yeah.
And
see, I hate
is
those episodes.
Okay.
The interdimensional
cable. I hate those.
I love what Michael once said, where he said it takes a lot of it was something like it takes a lot of nerve to have a clip show in your first season or something.
Yeah. I've always said that. I don't know. I don't think they did. I remember saying Rick and Morty is the type of show that would have a clip show in its first season. Because should I just get into the problems I have with it before we start?
Sure.
Well,
why not?
Have we finished this episode? Do we have anything else to talk about it?
Oh, just one more joke. Where
okay.
Just one more joke where after Morty has broken his legs after falling because he didn't turn his shoes on, he's ranting at Rick and he goes, "You're like Hitler, but even Hitler cared about Germany
or something." Yeah.
Or something.
Okay. So before we get
this
into
new segment,
rest
Michael hates Rick and Morty.
Before we get into the
next
Lawnmower
episode.
Dog, Total Rickall, and the Ricklantis mix-up.
Yeah, just so I'm across what I think of the show. All right, so I think it's, like we were saying before, me and Stefan have discussed this at length. I don't want to undermine, like, the quality of writing. Stuff like, I think all the episodes are genuinely very funny, and ones like, especially like the Ricklantis mix-up, I think is genuinely kind of biting, satire of American culture. The problem I have with Rick and Morty is kind of its kind of tonal arrogance that punctuates the entire series. I can't quite put my finger on it, but there's this weird kind of like this conceit to the entire thing with all the delivery, just the tone of the episodes when like it's very self-congratulatory and very kind of it's almost masturbatory. They're just so in love and they have so much faith in their own material that like they're just constantly kind of celebrating themselves, and I think that's kind of off-putting because I've always talked about that conceit and putting yourself on a pedestal in comedy isn't funny. Like self-deprecation is funny because comedy is all about punching up. You go after kind of the big guy, but if you put yourself on a pedestal, you can only ever punch down. That's kind of the issue I have with it is that there's this weird kind of arrogance and like a weird disdain for their audience throughout the entire series. Like, they really kind of get across this tone of, like, everything we do is gold. I just feel like they know that they can do no wrong, or at least they feel like they can do no wrong. And nothing exemplifies that more than the Interdimensional Cable episodes. We're not covering those this week, but the Interdimensional Cable episodes are basically, they're not clip shows, but they're like little comedy vignettes.
Yeah.
Where Rick reworks their television so it receives cable from, other dimensions. And he just kind of channel surfs serves and each of the channels is a little improvised, self-contained comedy sketch, usually voiced by Justin Roiland, or is it all every time voiced by Justin Roiland?
Every time it is, but then they rework it with other voice actors if they need to, and then...
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it just seems like no matter if the joke works or not, they just put it out there because they know that people will enjoy it, even if there really isn't, you know, like a comedic structure behind it, or if the joke really doesn't work at all. They just feel like... I just feel like they think they're so good at what they do that even their random rudderless improv will be, you know, celebrated.
The thing is, though, it is. Like,
It
everyone
is
loves
celebrated.
it.
It's frustrating. So, like, I completely understand and I respect people that like it. Just personally, I cannot get past that overbearing conceit and, like, utter contempt for their own audience.
The one that always stands out to me is the last thing they say in season 3, where Mr. Poopy Butthole, whom I hate Mr. Poopy.
Isn't that season 2?
No, season 3. No, where at the end of it, he's just like, wow, well, I don't know what you did in that time. I hope you guys didn't just waste your lives. I got a family and did all this. What did you
that's right.
losers do?
Like, another example that really exemplifies that is, I think, at the start of Interdimensional Cable 2, when Rick says something like, in regards to the first Cable episode, he said, like, "Are we doing Interdimensional Cable again, Rick?" He says, like, "Yeah, we pretty much killed it the first time." It's like, no, you don't say that in comedy. That's like I feel like that should be a rule. You don't, in terms of self-referentiality, you don't congratulate yourself for doing something. You never pat yourself on the back in comedy, because I just find it's the least funny thing you can do. So, that's my rant on the tonal issues I have with the television show. Thoughts?
Okay, so, while I really love Rick and Morty, I 100% agree with you.
Okay.
So, the way I see it is that it's different to how other shows approach comedy.
Yeah, it is
in
different.
that sort of sense.
I think there's an element of me just not being used to that.
But also the fact that a lot of it is coming from Rick's point of view, where Rick himself is a character who puts himself up on a pedestal all the time. It's like a Sheldon Cooper type of character where they think they're the most important thing and like everything revolves around them.
Yeah.
Except Rick also believes that nothing matters. Again,
I think it's a great show. I just think, like, I can't get past that for me. I can't make that extra step and really enjoy it.
Yeah, and that's fair enough because, as you said, all humor is subjective.
Yeah, and I completely know. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to. Like, it did sound that was kind of a damning
No.
criticism, but
I've
I
heard
completely
that-
understand.
yeah.
Completely understand why people enjoy it.
But like I've heard that criticism before, but I've heard why people like that because it's like, oh, people can like kind of get along with it. But then again, with having that sort of humor, it brought in a lot of fans that genuinely think it is the best show ever and genuinely think they are the best fans ever.
Yeah.
And it brought a really toxic fan
I
base.
feel like that's a vocal minority, though.
I know,
as
but
with a lot
they
of fan
are
bases, and I think
very loud though. They reflect a lot of the things that you said.
Yeah, but that is such a flagrant misinterpretation of the show that I'm almost inclined to just not believe that they exist. Like, how can anyone watch Rick and Morty and morally identify with Rick? It's insane. It's absolutely insane. Anyway,
So
episode 2.
So, episode 2, Lawnmower Dog. This is my favorite episode of season 2. And it's
Season 1.
Season 1, sorry. And it's the second episode. So, it's a real downhill battle from there. Uphill battle from there. But that's just my personal opinion. So, basically, the A plot is that...
Oh, can I explain this one?
Okay.
Oh, great. Oh, no, now I need to think of it. Okay, so let's separate it into the family plot and Rick and Morty's plot.
A plot and B plot.
Yeah, but okay. A plot can be the Rick. Oh, whatever. So A plot is that Jerry is upset with Morty's
That's
dog.
the B plot.
Oh, okay. That can be the B plot then. But that ends up being the main one. You cut this all out,
See,
Michael.
this is what I was going to do. I was going to explain the A plot, then the B plot, but then
Oh.
you took over.
Fine, you do it then, Ben. I'll just chirp him when I want.
So, the A plot is Rick wants to spend more time with Morty, but in order for that to happen, Morty has good grades so he can skip school a bit. So, Rick decides, he's going to incept Morty's math teacher to give him A's. So, he gets Morty, and then they go into the mind of his teacher, Mr. Goldenfold. Then they have to go through different layers of the dreamscape in order to incept the mind that he is going to give Morty Smith an A+ for his grades. But things go a bit sideways when they run into Scary Terry, the Freddy Krueger of Mr. Goldenfold's mind.
What does he call him? Like a copyright safe version of an 80s slasher character or whatever
Yep.
it is. Yeah.
I should have brought that pop figure. Anyway.
You have a Scary Terry pop figure?
Yep.
Does he have his weird tumorous testicles on his chin?
Yes.
Oh my god.
They're printed on. They're not actually
Oh,
sculpted
okay,
on.
yeah, they're not actually...
So, while this very inceptive A plot happens, there's another type of plot for the B plot.
So
What is that?
The B plot is basically that Jerry is upset with Snuffles, who's Morty's dog, because he pees on the carpet, doesn't listen and whatnot, and Morty congratulates him even though he really shouldn't be. So Jerry says, before you leave, Rick, do something to fix the dog. So Rick just comes up with this, like, helmet thing that makes the dog answer to orders a lot better and makes him a bit smarter. But the problem is the dog works out how to use the helmet to improve his intelligence tenfold.
And
by-
somehow they do that just by adding batteries.
Yeah, how does that work?
He stifled its intelligence by just not putting the requisite amount of batteries into the helmet.
Anyway, keep going.
So then Snuffles basically decides, okay, I'm going to keep building my mechanical body now, and he makes like this little mech for himself.
Which comes to my favourite line. Where are my testicles, Summer? Anyway, continue with the plot.
No, but basically all the dogs, Snowball gets a bunch of other dogs to join his empire, and then it does this little flashback where the dogs have now taken over humanity and destroyed everything. But then it turns out that this then interacts with the
Inception.
A plot, in which this was actually an incepted idea that Rick put into Snowball's
yeah.
mind. And so it was in order to try and convince him that
He shouldn't take over the world.
Yeah, so then the dogs end up leaving the Earth, and Rick says, oh, well, I reckon they'll be fine. It could even turn into a great sitcom to come, whatever, something like that. And that's how the episode ends.
Yeah. To me, it's crazy. They had these two completely different ideas and managed to blend them seamlessly with one another.
That it does well, but something tonally, that before we go into just a few animation stuff, that I don't like is I don't like how Rick and Morty, in general, takes parodies. Like, it'll take, like, a slasher character or Inception, the movie idea, state it's from the movie, and then completely make it its own and just keep using it. Like, it uses these concepts which are already from another film exclusively.
And it constantly puts down the concepts as well.
Yeah.
When, like, Rick constantly says how shit Inception is, but they use the core conceit of it anyway.
Yeah, and they say, oh, he's a slasher character, and they've probably made more money from Scary Terry merch than, I don't know, Freddy Krueger merch. I'm not saying
not
that it's a
true.
proper
That
thing.
is
but
not true at
no,
all.
No, but I mean, like, they're banking on someone else's idea, and it's not just a throwaway parody.
They also seem to make a lot of fun of franchises and merchandising and unnecessary commercialization of properties.
See,
But they're a hyper commercial property.
the thing is, they used to not be that hyper commercialized, but it was just when season 3 rolled out. That's when a lot of fans started getting on board and everything. So season 3, you ruined everything.
In terms of animation, though, I really loved every part of when Scary Terry enters the fray.
Oh,
Because it has the really
great.
nice corridor scenes. It has some great perspective
Just
scenes.
disgusting. He looks gross.
He looks gross, but it's fun.
It's a fun gross though.
He's also
Yeah.
a nice pink, which I
Yeah.
really like the pink they chose.
He's also a nice dude.
he's a
He's,
nice
he's
guy.
pretty chill.
He's just doing a job.
Yeah, I mean he'll cut your head off as he's 9 to 5, but then he'll go home like that, like the sheep dog and the wolf in those Looney Tunes cartoons.
They even do the subversive joke where they're just like, oh, I can't even imagine what a monster like Scary Terry would have nightmares of. It's just him at school without his pants on.
And then getting embarrassed by not knowing the answers. It's
It's
like,
that's fun. That's a
Yeah.
fun little writing joke.
Does he not question also that the guys he saw in his dream are just standing over his bed when he wakes up?
Yeah, I know. That always freaks
because
me
they're in the classroom with him.
Yeah, but he wakes up and he's like, instead of going, oh my god, who are you, get out of my house, he's like, oh, you guys.
Well, he wouldn't be scared of them.
It's
He's only
an
scared of
animated
school.
comedy.
Yeah, and then back to the B plot. I really like Jerry as a character, not as a person, but as a
No, he's a
character,
good character.
because he's just menial at everything.
Yeah.
He's just such an average guy, and he just tries to go about all these high concept sci-fi tropes, just going about everywhere, and it's just like, I just want my wife to be happy with me. Well, I just want the TV to work. I just want my dog to obey simple commands. And I think how they
He
convey...
just wants control over something.
Yeah, because he has no control over his
He
life.
has no control over his life, so he tries to control his dog, and then inadvertently leads to the dog taking over the world.
But I really like how Snuffle/Snowball, like, the build up to all his plans is like, oh, you can actually see the inner workings of his mind with the dog show on the TV, with the helmet, and then just like wanting a better life, and then wanting to treat Jerry, especially, well, humans, but especially Jerry, like how he's treated them.
I do really like the delivery of the joke when he says like Snuffles is my slave name. You may call me Snowball because my fur is
white.
fluffy and white. Just like I like the delivery of that.
No, I was just gonna say, because the voice stylings of Justin Roiland really permeate most of the show's humor.
Oh, we didn't mention this, but Justin Roiland does Rick and Morty's voice as well as a lot of supporting
Which
characters.
is a really good voice performance. They're like, you can kind of tell which characters he voices throughout the episode.
Yeah.
Like, again, with all voice actors, like there's this underlying kind of cadence to their voice where you can tell that they're all done by the same person. But Rick and Morty, like, again, you can tell that they're done by the same guy, but they're really good, really distinctive, funny voices.
Okay, sorry for interrupting.
Oh no,
It was an interruption.
I was just gonna say that.
Sorry for interrupting, Stefan.
Oh. I was just going to say that although his humour and his voice really permeates most of the show, the other voice actors and characters really give their own work. Like, I
they
love
really
Summer's
do.
voice. Like, Summer goes from takes that really, like, removed teenager character and makes it seem a lot more realistic and also over the top at the same time.
Yeah.
Justin Roiland does Mr. Poopy Butthole.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's the same voice as
I
Morty.
hate Mr. Poopy Butthole.
When we get to that episode, you can explain why you hate Mr.
I
Poopy
reckon
Butthole.
that episode would have been so much better if he died.
Well, he almost did. Anyway,
No, he should have actually died.
So you like that episode, everybody? Next episode,
Just
we're going to
wait.
keep going.
there's one thing I wanted to mention. Now, but I'm forgetting. Oh, Sarah Chalk. She does the voice of Beth, the mother. I think she only gets cast as one type of person because in this, she's a horse surgeon. In Scrubs, she is a doctor. And in How I Met Your
people
Mother,
surgeon.
in How I Met Your Mother, she is also a doctor. So I think she just gets typecast as doctors in everything she's in.
She's quite a like a collected professional manner of speaking. I think.
Yeah, she does it well, which is probably why she does it. But yeah,
I quite like Jerry's voice. Just kind of like this every man who's just lost complete control of his life and everything in it.
apparently for a lot of his voice work, they mostly go with the first time they record it because
Yeah,
he
I
just
remember-
delivers it really well every single time.
Yeah, I think I remember reading something like that when all the other actors go through multiple takes, but the guy who does Jerry does it right the first time.
Okay, now we'll get on to the third episode that we watched, which was Total Rickall.
This is an episode that I love it in that it takes a sci-fi concept and the whole episode is purely about that one sci-fi concept and it explores it in such interesting and fun ways that it's both a visual treat and just fun story-wise and joke-wise.
So it's not, there's no A plot or B plot, it's just one plot. And it's also a bottle episode, yet introduces I think it was up to 50, 60, 70 characters.
It's like an anti-bottle episode
But
because
it is a bottle episode.
they keep adding people.
yeah, they're stuck in a room, but they keep adding more and more
It's just
characters.
a subversion of a bottle episode.
This almost feels like they gave all the animators and storyboarders and all the artists and said, just design any random characters, think of the most bizarre things you can think of and we'll put them in the episode.
Which I think is pretty much what they did. But because there were so many characters, they couldn't do as many character rigs as they wanted to.
Yeah, so they only picked a few to
well,
focus
sorry,
on.
they didn't do as complex as ones. Which, as well, it looks great as it is, but it would have been cool to see everyone moving at the same, have the same type of rig and
So
everything.
the story of Total Rickall is that there's basically, the title is actually a parody to Arnold
Total
Schwarzenegger.
Recall.
Yeah. But the plot is basically about these aliens have invaded Rick's house. Or
a
Beth's house.
parasite.
A parasite. And what they do is they feed on memories. They take the host's memories and implant their own characters into that person's memories as if they've been there their entire life. And so Rick puts the whole house in lockdown until he can work out who's the real family members and who's not.
So who was there originally? There was Rick,
Rick,
Morty, Summer, Beth, Jerry, and Mr. Poopy
and Mr.
Butthole.
Poopy Butthole. And basically, it's telegraphing that we've got to watch out for any zany, cartoony characters because they won't be real. And that's why they introduce Mr. Poopy Butthole as being like the archetype for that joke.
Oh,
It
Rick.
reminded me of Roy from The Simpsons.
And then what ends up happening is it just keeps adding more and more characters. It starts having really fun, like, character interactions and just scenes that really make the characters question what's real and what's not. I love how in one of them that Jerry's not even the husband of Beth anymore. That Sleeping Gary, one of the parasites is.
The Sleepy Gary scene with Jerry when they're just on a yacht looking at the sunset, talking about Star Wars. That's one of my favorite scenes from this, just the whole season and maybe even the series. Just
so
because
I like
silly.
that because it's played completely straight.
Exactly.
But Morty basically figures out that the parasites only instill good memories of themselves in the host, and so they need to try and remember any bad memories they have of everyone in order to eliminate all the parasites. And that's what they end up doing in the very humane way of shooting the crap out of everything that isn't a human.
It's a fun kind of climax of the episode when they just go through.
Yeah,
the
and the animation there is actually really fun.
Because I like how when they shoot those parasites and they kind of shrivel up into their
Original forms.
Yeah,
Looks great.
Yeah, great transformation sequence.
The episode ends with telegraphing the fact that Mr. Poopy Butthole is the last cartoonishly bizarre character there. Beth has no bad memories of him, and so she shoots him. Turns out he's a real person.
He's a real guy.
And so
Much to Stefan's dismay.
he's just bleeding
And
to death.
you can see it coming from a mile
you
away.
can, but
it's
it is still
it's
really-
still funny. It's a funny joke.
They have a follow-up thing after credits where... No, not even after credits. Just
I
at
keep
the end
forgetting
of
that
the
there
episode.
credits.
I keep forgetting that there are post-credit scenes in these, and sometimes they reveal quite important plot points.
Permanent plot points.
Yeah.
Which it's always
Which
it's
this
always
one
bad.
is, because we find out that Mr. Poopy Butthole is alive, and Beth just has this big guilt around it, and he
But
doesn't
as we
want
were
to see her
saying,
ever again.
as Stefan pointed out, he should have died.
I don't like him.
It would have been
I
better
just
if he died.
I think it would have been better for the fan base if he died. I will say, because
What is he?
his
He looks like the original concept sketch for SpongeBob. Have you seen it? When he actually looks like a sea sponge.
maybe that it was based on that.
Maybe
Who
it
That'd be
knows?
terrible.
Because he is like a kind of like an annoying kid, like SpongeBob.
Yeah. Oh, he kind
Man
of sounds
kid,
like his
yeah.
voice is similar. Yeah.
Yeah. Any other standout parts from this
Yes,
episode?
it's not an animation thing, but it's one of my favorite things in it. Besides all the wacky characters and situations and whatnot, the supercut of all of Rick's unheard catchphrases.
Oh yes, I love that part.
Grass tastes bad.
Ticky ticky tabby. AIDS. He just says AIDS. Oh my.
Like none of the catchphrases I ever heard, but they're just random.
And
things.
how he tries to get a Nintendo sponsorship, which is kind of like me trying to get a Netflix sponsorship.
He just says it.
But we will reluctantly accept a Nintendo sponsorship.
Yes, we will.
We can
Nintendo, if you're listening, sponsor us.
Send us a 2DS and we'll share it.
Not a Switch, a 2DS.
We want a 2DS. We don't want a Switch. We want one of those big ones that look like an axe head.
But yeah, I think a lot of the character designs in this episode are really great. And
definitely the highlight, just seeing all these characters in different colors.
in fact, I have a card game based off this episode where you actually have to try to find out who's a parasite and who's not.
They're all parasites except the family.
I know, but for the card game.
Oh, so
yeah.
it's like it's just randomly assigned.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
And-
fun.
Yeah, and like you get like a closer look at all the characters. Like there's the puppet garbage man based off Oscar the Grouch.
Puppet Garbage Man is that his name?
I think so.
It's
yeah.
funny.
There's Duckman. There's Baby Wizard.
Duckman was a television
There's-
series starring Jason Alexander.
Oh, okay.
In the late
This is
90s.
the most bizarre knowledge for you to know offhand.
Jason Alexander's in it. Of course, I have to know about it.
There's Photographer Raptor.
I love Photographer Raptor.
Pencil Vesta.
Yeah, Pencil Vesta. Yeah, it's just a really going away from the card game. It's just like the diversity of the characters that they drew is just really fun to look at. And they even pointed out, which might be a bit too self-congratulatory for Michael, but there's even a shot where Rick goes, "Hey, look, it's like a Where's Waldo?
Look at all the wacky zany characters around.
Yeah, be
That one's
back
not
after
too
the
bad
break."
because it's not inherently good or bad. He's just comparing it to a Where's Wally thing.
But yeah, definitely one of the highlights of the series, this episode.
A lot of fun.
It's also well written in terms of how all the characters interact. So it's definitely one of the, and it's not never too heavy with its serious plot. It's one of the few ones of the later seasons that doesn't rely on having a serious undertone. Like it's all silly.
I did find funny and amusing how like the entire like the moral of the story is that family are people that you have negative memories of.
Yeah, so then we get to the third season, and just as a quick note about the third season, there was like a 1.5 to 2 year gap between season 2 and 3.
And the popularity exploded in that time.
Why after that one specifically?
Oh, because they had a hard time getting down the scripts, which is the same reason why there was a big gap between season 3 and 4 as well. Just
It's
because-
been like 2 years, hasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. But they have said that, from now on, we do have like a good formula for writing scripts now.
Okay, so now
So-
we only have one every 18
We'll have
months.
a season every 1 year, or maybe like 13, 14
Yeah, that's
months.
regular animation production time. Except Rick and Morty has very short seasons.
Yeah, 10 episodes.
Yeah.
But again, there's a lot of detail and stuff in
Yeah,
these.
I tend to like 10 episode seasons more because I think 22 episode seasons you start to you run out of ideas a little bit quicker.
Yeah.
Simpsons
Well,
still got
We still got 70 episodes according to Cartoon Network's order for Rick and Morty.
wow.
Yeah, so including season 4, there's
It doesn't
70
seem like it can last
episodes.
that long. I feel like they're at 30 at the moment, and I think Rick and Morty is one of those shows where it still is it's still in that era where every episode is memorable. Every
yeah.
episode is its own story that you remember.
Oh, definitely,
Definitely,
so.
yeah.
Especially with season 3.
Yeah,
Like
'cause-
season 3, each episode, people could write a song for every episode.
Yeah, 'cause
and those songs for the record are great.
They are great.
Because
Whoever does those.
we've talked about it, Stefan. The first
You have to speak to the
first
microphone.
8 seasons of The Simpsons and first 4 seasons of Futurama. Every single episode is memorable. It's only when you get past those that like there are a couple of throwaway episodes people don't quite remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, but before those periods, every single one has is iconic in its own right and kind of rife with iconography. So it's good that Rick and Morty's still in that phase. I mean,
Yeah.
there's not that many episodes. They barely filled out 2 seasons of a regular show. Like yeah.
Okay, so it's called the Ricklantis mix-up, and we see that, Rick and Morty are going to go to Atlantis to have a fun adventure. But little do we know that it's actually going to be, so the actual title is called the Ricklantis mix-up, but when we get into the episode, they actually rename it, calling it
Tales.
Rick and Morty, the Tales of the Citadel, which I actually knew beforehand because a few weeks before they released the episode list, and what
Oh.
the titles were, but then they changed it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, from the Tales of the Citadel to the Ricklantis mix-up.
Okay.
Okay, so
That's
yeah.
kind of interesting.
So we have the Ricklantis mix-up. So Michael, the
So
story.
there exists a citadel in space, kind of this enormous like societal space station populated entirely by the Ricks and Mortys from different dimensions, and this episode basically follows the stories of a couple of different Ricks and a couple of different Mortys as it basically satirizes elements of like modern American culture. So everything from like education to worker exploitation to racism to gang violence.
Fun stuff.
Fun stuff. But the entire episode. Well, no, sorry. The Citadel itself, as as it operates as a society, is basically a metaphorical microcosm for American culture, and I think it's a genuinely good, reasonably depthful exploration of society, like modern societal woes.
So there's 4 storylines that go throughout it. So there's a cop procedural
Yeah, police procedural, which explores kind of gang violence and racism
and corruption.
and class divide, and that's my favorite one because I think,
Yeah.
Even though that's one where the satire is the most blunt, there's a lot of stuff where like
I would generally watch a spin-off of that.
yeah, because it's interesting. I like how it uses kind of buddy cop tropes to explore Mortys are treated as kind of a repressed minority whether the Ricks are
The upperclassmen.
the upper echelon, upper class, they're in charge. They kind of culturally repress all of the Mortys and treat them as second class citizens. And there's a lot of elements of like mental colonization, which is refers to the people who are being repressed, the people who are being colonized, thinking like being conditioned to think of themselves as second class citizens or the inferior culture, and instead they try and emulate kind of the culture or the mannerisms or the actions of their colonizers, basically.
Which leads into the second storyline, which is a government race, a political race.
Yeah. Which again goes into a little bit about government corruption and bribes and bureaucracy and governmental backstabbings and things like that.
The third story is the 1980s film Stand By Me.
Stand By Me.
Yes. Oh, so good.
Moving on next.
That's the most blunt parody of saturation.
But like mixed in with a bit of Harry Potter for some reason.
Yeah, and then
Severus Rick or whatever he is.
yeah, and then there's the fourth storyline, which is a worker uprising of sorts,
Yeah, it's about worker exploitation. It's really sad.
mixed with some Willy Wonka.
I really liked this episode. I thought this one was
I think because despite them being Rick and Morty's, they introduced all new characters living in this world and how they deal with it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most interesting part.
An excellent kind of comprehensive voice performance by Justin Roiland. Even though I find him kind of obnoxious in real life, I think like his performance throughout the episode is really good. And the episode almost it feels like a short film. It feels almost too comprehensive and too well told to be just an episode of a series.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like this is the first one when like again we talked a lot about before how I don't quite like the conceit and the arrogance, but it kind of fell to the wayside in this episode, and they really just kind of focused on the satire and just they didn't present it with any conceit. There wasn't any arrogance. They just presented it. This is a farcical look at America and its problems.
I also really like, as you said, with the really tight writing, it was just really incredible, and how they were able to manage and characterize all these different characters and give them meaning. And then at the end, it has that shot where they're all ejected into space.
Yeah, exactly.
And dead.
Just how
That is such a miserable shot.
All the people who opposed the new President Morty.
Also, the fact that they telegraph who that Morty is using the Evil Morty theme song from season one. I know it's corny, but that's
when
really
do they telegraph it? Is it the song at the very end?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then you see those pictures of Evil Morty as well.
Yeah.
When Evil Morty first showed up his episode, it ended with him putting like his eye socket or changing something on his face, and it had that song playing.
Yeah.
And the fact that they brought it back here, it didn't need to tell you who it was. You immediately knew.
But they kind of
who it
do
was.
tell you, because there's like one of like the campaign manager Morty, his briefcase spills open and there's a couple of like incriminating photos.
But,
which
but they
reveal his
don't
identity.
outright tell you though.
No, it just kind of you blink and you miss it. It just kind of floats past. But like if you're looking, if you pay attention, you can see it in the shot. It's not like in the background or anything. It goes past the screen.
But I think that was just a really great way of even getting this sense of, okay, things are not going right here. Something's underlying. There's some corruption. There's something bad going on.
I can't remember, like it's a really good episode.
It is.
It's fantastic.
Animation wise, it's really hard.
Design wise, I just want to mention something. So back in season 1, they designed the Council of Rick symbol, which is just the R without the stripe with the star. But then when Morty becomes president, we see that R being turned into a thumb, and then the M for Morty being used as the rest of the fingers to form a fist.
Huh.
And I think it's really, really clever how they managed to get a symbol they invented way before they even thought of this episode and transformed it into something new.
I'm not sure if this was intentional. It feels intentional, but is the Council of... I'm not sure if you know. Is the Council of Ricks kind of a reference to the Council of Reeds from the Fantastic Four comics?
I have no idea.
Wait, yes, I think it is actually.
Because in Fantastic Four, there's the more I say, the more it's just incredibly similar. But there's an interdimensional council comprised of most, if not all, of the Reed Richards from from the Marvel multiverse, the different dimensions. So you got like you got the Reed from the 616 universe, and you got the Reed from the vast stretches of the multiverse who converge in like a neutral interdimensional plane, and they talk about matters that affect the multiverse.
I have no idea, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Council
if it
of
was.
Ricks, Council of Reeds, Interdimensional Council of the same person.
Yeah,
Strikingly similar. Could be a coincidence. Who knows? Good stuff.
I really love the Stand By Me stuff, not only because it's such a blatant ripoff, but just because of how like each of the characters were portrayed, and it was a bit like overblown and everything. And then there's also the worker uprising, where we see this Rick just being annoyed by everyday life. He kills the Rick that they make these candies from his memories, and it's really brutal because they try to trick this Rick into diving into a portal that goes into a blended dimension, but he shoves the Rick that produces all this candy into that.
Yeah.
And like,
There's just this vicious cycle where the corporation's just always on top. They've somehow managed to package and commercialize like happiness and euphoria. It's great.
but in like a really, really not sad way,
In a sterile way, they've commercialized it. They're profiting off it. Yeah, like it's a great episode. The satire is genuinely biting and clever.
And we actually have a relatable Rick in this, which is the cop Rick. He's like,
he's kind of like he's a simple. No,
He's
he's not
sympathetic.
simple Rick, but he's a sympathetic, simpler Rick.
yeah. And I really liked seeing that side of Justin Roiland, like bring that sort of character to Rick.
Where Morty gets to be the superior for a
Yeah.
little bit, and he's kind of like the fat, like stereotype cop Morty as well.
Yeah.
And I talked about mental colonization before. This, like the policeman Morty, is under the impression that like Mortys are inferior, and Rick kind of mentions to him it's weird hearing a Morty speak ill of other Mortys like that. Yeah. I thought that stuff is great, and that episode I think is just again very, very clever.
Like, if you just wanted to watch an episode of Rick and Morty,
I wouldn't start here.
yeah, I wouldn't start.
It makes no
but
sense.
This is one of the best ones to watch, but it doesn't reflect the rest of the series.
I think the ones you picked are quite a good range in terms of...
What the show can be.
Again, these are my favorite, apart from the pilot. We just watched the pilot because it's a pilot. But Lawnmower Dog, Total Rickall, and the Ricklantis mix-up, these are my favorite episodes from each of the seasons, probably of the entire show itself. And it's like what it can live up to, and what you want to expect from a show like this.
Final thoughts?
I really like it.
We know what you think.
We know what you think too.
Yeah, we spent 25 minutes talking about
Stefan,
that.
you
What do you
haven't
think?
you haven't talked that much during this.
Oh, wow!
You hate Mr. Poopy Butthole.
Oh, yeah, I'm done. No, I have not much to say. It's really hard to talk about this show and say whether I like the serious parts or the fun parts, because I watched the Ricklantis mix-up and I think this is really great writing and this is really fun, but I also loved when it was just silly, fun sci-fi adventures.
Okay, and that is the end of talking about Rick and Morty seasons 1 to 3. Maybe we will revisit some episodes. Who knows? But
No.
Next week. So
Oh yeah, sorry, we're new to this. Since we're new to this new scheduling system, who's next week?
Ben
I'm next
Ben
week.
and Stefan.
no, just me. We'll do next week, as in the episode.
Yeah, next week.
But then we both have to pick something today.
Only I do.
Yes.
But he does.
But
I
you
can pick
do
something
too.
later in the week.
Okay.
Yeah, but he doesn't have to say it now in the
Okay.
podcast.
We'll cut all this out. Ben, what are we watching next week?
So Thomas, who emailed us.
Oh,
So there
we're
are
ignoring your suggestion.
No, there are 2 Doctor Who animated series which we are going to watch. Each of them, the whole season is 45 minutes. Which is
Brilliant!
So to watch 2 of them, that's 90 minutes all up.
Fantastic.
So there
exactly
is-
my time length.
Doctor Who: The Infinite Quest, I believe, and Doctor
If
Who
it goes a second over, I'm turning it off.
and Doctor Who Dreamland.
Okay. Which Doctor Who is it?
They're
David
both
Tennant.
yeah,
Oh, I like
they're both
David
David
Tennant.
Tennant.
Yeah,
One of
good.
them is 2D animated, one of them is 3D animated.
Cool. Is it actually voiced by David Tennant?
I hope so. I will
I hope
look
so.
it up.
Not like the Yellow Submarine. That was what a surprise that was.
I mean, David Tennant does do voice work now, a bit of voice work now, so it wouldn't surprise me if he did. So yeah, that's what we'll be doing next week. And that is all. So if you'd like to contact us for good or for ill, so if you want to send us some mean comments, more than
Or
welcome
recommendation.
or recommendations, or even praise that even though we don't deserve
we don't
it.
deserve.
So we are at animate3pod@gmail.com. We're also on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. And you can find us at any type of podcasting place imaginable except Google Play. And we are also on YouTube. I also post clips of it on Instagram and the whole episode on Facebook as well, if you want to listen via those. And am I missing anything to say? No, goodbye! Da-da-da-da-da, dun, dun, dun.
The end. They get Doctor Who in America.
Yeah, but they find it all boring and long. They want the American version of Doctor Who, just like with The Office, just like a few other shows.
Doctor Woohoo?
When he doesn't have a sonic screwdriver, he's just got a gun.